So, in addition to states, another very important term in international affairs is the term nation. Now, nations were referenced earlier when we were talking about the permanent population within a state. But nation is actually a much broader term and can encompass kind of any group that intentionally identifies along a certain set of common characteristics, such as language, history, religion, etc. In its most broadest form, you hear the term nation used in instances like Bulldog Nation, anybody that identifies around the University of Georgia. In a more specific case, however, it could also be used to describe kind of a specific ethnic group or religious group that identify along those common characteristics. For this video, I would like to talk a little bit about the Kurds. The Kurds are a nation of people that wish to have statehood, but currently do not. They are located they are located in the Middle East and can be found across 5 different territories that belong to other states. As you can tell from the map, in the Middle East there were 2 large empires that kind of butted up next to each other. To the west was the Ottoman Empire, and to the east is the Persian Empire. And beginning around the 15th, 16th century, these empires consolidated control in these 2 areas. And right along the fault line of those 2 empires is a mountain range. And within that mountain range was a group of ethnically distinct people known as the Kurds. And so, whereas the Kurds had access to these different cultures in some ways by being in the middle of 2 vying empires trying to stretch westward or stretch eastward, it actually freed the Kurds up to have some relative independence from being consolidated completely by either one of the empires. And as a result, you have a ethnically distinct part or population that has existed that is neither kind of identifies with the predominantly Sunni Arab ethnic groups on the west within the Arabian Peninsula and to the north, nor does it fully identify with the more Shia Persian Empire to the east. That's also associated with present-day Iran. And so, in fact, the Kurds are an interesting nation because they are ethnically distinct. They have their own language. They have their own music. That was the one of the Kurdish song was the intro played for this video, and actually are relatively religiously diverse. Most of the Middle East identifies with Sunni Muslim population. About 90% that practice Islam identifies as Sunni, and so most Kurds that practice Islam are Sunni. But in fact, we have Kurds that are Shia, those that identify as Christian, known as the Yazidis. And so really, this is a nation that identifies more along kind of secular commonalities than along religion. As you can tell from the infograph, there are about 35 million Kurds that exist in the world today, most of which, more than half, exist within Turkey. And so if you hear on the news about Turkey being opposed or clashing with Kurdish forces, you can start to unpack this reality where the Kurds really are seeking or see themselves as a distinct ethnic group across 5 different states, and they kind of feel a little bit of conflict with each of these states, and especially within Turkey. Now, when I say 5 states, it's of course Turkey and Syria, Iraq, Iran, and then there's also a small population of Kurds that kind of stretch into Armenia that do not show up on the infograph. One of the things that you may have heard about when it comes to the Kurds is their participation within the Syrian civil war. And if you start to think about their perspective, you can understand that if they've been defending territory or trying to kind of carve out their own existence across 5 states, and both prior to that, between 2 big empires, they probably got pretty good at defending themselves and defending their territory. And you see that in the Kurdish culture, there's a strong military culture, and it's pretty egalitarian when it comes to both women and men, and even at times even at times young children fighting when necessary. So during a time where the Syrian civil war and after the Iraq war, this region was kind of embroiled in conflict. The terrorist group known as ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, moved into the territory and tried to consolidate control over these areas. And ISIS was having relative success because these two countries and their governments were kind of embroiled in civil wars, and insurgent groups were trying to take power from the governments and control. Meanwhile, as ISIS was moving into the Kurdish territory, the Kurds did what exactly they'd been doing for centuries. They defended their territory against the onslaught of people trying to take it. And so the United States found themselves in a really interesting role where they were, in fact, supporting the Kurds against ISIS while also being very close allies with Turkey. You know, Turkey is a member of NATO, and so we're considered to have a strong alliance connection with Turkey. And so we were in a bit of a triangulation where we were working with Turkey in order to try to fight ISIS and working with the Kurds in order to try to fight ISIS while making sure that they did not fight one another. That was predominantly our policy under the Obama administration. Currently, Trump is considered removing U.S. troops from the area, considering ISIS to be kind of well defeated. And when he's made these announcements, our Kurdish allies have been very concerned that that may mean an increase in Turkish presence into their region now that we're not defending the Kurds or helping the Kurds. Okay, and now for a slightly more serious question about statehood. From what I've mentioned, the Kurds have been found in a given territory. There's a permanent population over centuries that identify along common characteristics. And the final piece I'll say is that there are some pretty great political governance structures in place within each of the countries. There's autonomous regions within Iraq and organizational bodies within Syria, as well as the other countries. So, my lasting question to you is: do you believe that the Kurds have what it takes to acquire statehood? Why or why not? For this assignment, I'm asking you to submit a policy brief. A policy brief would be considered to be a more formal response to the question than a thought share, specifically focusing on making a clear argument and then using the supporting evidence from the videos from the course material in order to support your argument. Also, please make sure that if you are including it, to use citations.